My name is Nicole Brennan, and I'm 39 years old, and I'm a forensic accountant, which means I spend my days tracing money, finding fraud, and uncovering financial crimes for a living. So you'd think I would have been the first person to notice when my own sister was running a massive charity fraud scheme. But family blindness is real, and for 2 years I watched my younger sister Amanda become a local hero for her children's cancer charity without once questioning whether the money was actually going where she said it was. I trusted her because she's my sister, and because our parents raised us to be honest, and because I wanted to believe that Amanda had finally found her purpose after years of bouncing between jobs and get-rich-quick schemes. I was proud of her. We all were. And that pride made me miss what should have been obvious red flags. Amanda is 35, and for most of her adult life she's struggled to find direction. She dropped out of college after 2 years. She worked various retail and admin jobs. She was always chasing the next big thing, multi-level marketing schemes, online businesses, cryptocurrency investments. She'd get excited about something and throw herself into it, and then it would fizzle out and she'd move on to the next thing. Our parents worried about her constantly. They'd compare her to me and my stable career and my husband and my house, and I know that made Amanda feel inadequate. There was definitely some sibling rivalry there. I was the responsible older sister, and she was the flighty younger one, but we got along okay. We had dinner together regularly. We celebrated holidays as a family. I loved her even if I sometimes felt frustrated by her lack of direction. About 3 years ago, Amanda announced at a family dinner that she'd found her calling. She said she'd been volunteering at a children's hospital and had met families dealing with childhood cancer, and she was devastated by how expensive treatment was and how many families were struggling financially. She said she wanted to start a nonprofit organization to help these families, to raise money for medical bills and treatment costs, and to support children fighting cancer. Our parents were thrilled. They said this was exactly the kind of purpose Amanda needed, something meaningful and important. I was supportive too. I said I'd help her set up the nonprofit properly, make sure all the legal and financial structures were in place. She thanked me but said she'd already hired a lawyer to handle the incorporation and paperwork. She wanted to do this herself to prove she could. Amanda called her organization Hope for Kids Cancer Foundation. She created a website and social media accounts. She started posting stories about children with cancer and their families. She organized small fundraising events like bake sales and car washes. She seemed genuinely passionate about it, and I was happy to see her so focused and driven. Within a few months, she'd raised about $20,000, mostly from friends and family and small community donations. She posted updates showing checks being written to families and photos of her delivering care packages to the children's hospital. It all seemed legitimate and heartwarming. Our parents donated $5,000 and were so proud they told everyone they knew about Amanda's charity. Over the next year, Hope for Kids grew significantly. Amanda was working on it full-time. She'd quit her part-time retail job to focus entirely on the nonprofit. She said she wasn't taking a salary because every dollar needed to go to the kids. She was living off her savings, and it was worth it to make a difference. She organized bigger fundraising events, a charity auction, a 5K run, a gala dinner. She got local businesses to sponsor her. She got media coverage. The local news did a story about her and the charity. She was interviewed for the newspaper. She gave speeches at Rotary clubs and business groups. She was becoming a local celebrity, the face of children's cancer fundraising in our community. The money started pouring in. I saw the social media posts showing donation totals climbing. 50,000, 80,000, 100,000. Amanda posted photos of herself with sick children, heartwarming stories about families she'd helped, updates about medical bills she'd paid. She seemed to be making a real difference, and I was genuinely proud of her. Our parents threw her a party when the charity hit $200,000 raised. They invited all their friends, and Amanda gave this emotional speech about how she'd finally found her purpose, about how helping these families had changed her life. Everyone was crying, including me. I hugged her afterward and told her I was so proud of her, and she hugged me back and said this is what I was meant to do. By the end of year 2, Hope for Kids had raised just over $400,000. Amanda was now a minor celebrity in our city. She'd won a humanitarian award from the Chamber of Commerce. She was named Woman of the Year by a local magazine. She was invited to speak at events and conferences. She was on the board of several other nonprofits. She'd completely transformed her image from directionless younger sister to inspiring philanthropist. And I was happy for her success, but I'd started to notice some things that didn't quite add up. Nothing major, just little inconsistencies that my accountant brain couldn't help but flag. For one thing, Amanda seemed to be living better than she had before. She'd moved to a nicer apartment. She was driving a newer car. She was wearing expensive clothes and getting regular salon treatments. When I asked her about it, she said she'd been saving money by living frugally, and now she could afford some nice things. Plus, some of the business sponsors gave her gift cards and perks. It seemed reasonable enough. For another thing, I noticed that the charity's social media showed a lot of fundraising events, but not as many posts about actual families being helped. There were the initial stories from year one, but in year two, the focus seemed more on Amanda herself. Photos of her at galas, accepting awards, giving speeches, meeting donors. I mentioned this casually, and she said the families preferred privacy, so she wasn't posting about them as much. Again, it seemed reasonable. The thing that really started to bother me was when I asked Amanda for the charity's tax returns. Nonprofits have to file a Form 990 with the IRS every year. That's public record. It shows their revenue and expenses, and how they're spending donor money. I wanted to see it partly out of professional curiosity, and partly because I was thinking about doing a bigger personal donation and wanted to see the financials. Amanda got weird about it. She said the accountant who did the filing hadn't sent her the final version yet. She'd get it to me soon. Weeks went by and she kept making excuses. The accountant was backed up. The files were at her office. She couldn't find the digital copy. I let it go because I didn't want to seem like I didn't trust her, but it nagged at me. Then about 6 months ago, I attended one of Amanda's big fundraising galas. It was a black tie event at a fancy hotel. Tickets were $500 per person. There were silent auction items, a plated dinner, speeches from families the charity had supposedly helped. Amanda was the star of the evening in an expensive designer gown. She gave this incredibly moving speech about the importance of the work and how every dollar saved a life. People were writing checks on the spot. I saw donations of $10,000, $20,000. One guy pledged $50,000. The energy in the room was electric, and Amanda was glowing. But I found myself watching her instead of feeling inspired, and something felt off. After the gala, I went home, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how polished and professional everything was, about how expensive that venue must have been, about Amanda's designer dress and professional hair and makeup, about how the event must have cost at least $50,000 to put on. And I started wondering what the actual return on investment was. How much money went to the cause versus how much went to overhead and event costs. I know that nonprofits have expenses and that fundraising costs money, but something about the scale of it bothered me, so I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I used my access to financial databases to look up Hope for Kids Cancer Foundation. What I found made my stomach drop. The charity's Form 990 for the previous year was publicly available through the IRS database. I pulled it up and started reading. The total revenue was listed as $210,000, which matched what Amanda had been posting about. But when I looked at the expense breakdown, I felt sick. According to the tax return, the charity had spent $180,000 on operating expenses and only $30,000 on program services. Program services means the actual charitable work, helping families, paying medical bills. That's what donors think their money is going to. But only 15% of the donations were going to that. The other 85% was listed under categories like fundraising expenses, administrative costs, professional services, consulting fees. I dug deeper into the expense details. There were line items for things like event venues, catering, marketing materials, travel expenses, all of which could be legitimate for a nonprofit. But the amounts seemed really high, and there were vague categories like consulting services with no detail about what those services were. I looked at the list of directors and officers, and Amanda was listed as president and CEO, but with zero salary, which matched what she'd told us. But there was another name listed as a paid consultant, someone named Michael Tors who'd been paid $60,000. I didn't recognize the name, and when I searched for him online, I found nothing. No LinkedIn profile, no business website, nothing, which was strange for someone being paid that much. I should have gone to Amanda at that point and asked her to explain the financials. But I didn't because I was afraid of what I might find. Instead, I did what I do best. I investigated. I filed a Freedom of Information request for more detailed records. I contacted the IRS to request the full filing with all attachments and schedules. I started building a spreadsheet to track the charity's money. I know this sounds like I was being paranoid or mistrustful, but I've worked fraud cases for 15 years, and I know what red flags look like. High overhead expenses, vague consulting fees, missing details. These are classic signs of embezzlement or misappropriation of funds. Over the next few weeks, I pieced together a clearer picture, and it was worse than I'd imagined. I got access to the charity's bank statements through some connections I have in the banking industry. Technically, this was probably ethically questionable, but I justified it by telling myself I was protecting donors from potential fraud. The bank statements showed hundreds of transactions, and when I started categorizing them, I saw a pattern. There were legitimate charitable expenses like checks written to families and medical facilities, but those totaled only about $3,000 over 6 months, 3,000 out of hundreds of thousands raised. The rest of the money was going to things that had nothing to do with sick children. I found charges at high-end clothing stores, $5,000 at Neiman Marcus, $3,000 at Saks Fifth Avenue. I found charges at beauty salons and spas, regular payments for hair extensions, facials, massages. I found payments to plastic surgery clinics, $15,000 to a cosmetic surgery center. When I looked up the date, it corresponded with when Amanda had suddenly looked different. She'd told us she'd lost weight, but I realized she'd probably gotten liposuction and a breast augmentation. I found hotel charges in Las Vegas, multiple trips with stays at luxury hotels, charges at casinos and nightclubs. I found car payments for a Mercedes, insurance payments, everything suggesting Amanda was using charity funds to finance a lifestyle she could never afford on her own. The consulting payments to Michael Tors were particularly interesting. I traced them through the bank records, and they were going to an account in Amanda's name. Michael Tors didn't exist. Amanda had created a fake consultant to pay herself. She was funneling money through this fake person to avoid reporting it as salary. It was fraud, clear and obvious fraud. My sister was stealing from a children's cancer charity to pay for plastic surgery and Vegas trips and designer clothes. And she'd been doing it for 2 years, while accepting awards and being called a humanitarian. I felt physically ill. I sat at my desk with printouts of bank statements and tax returns spread everywhere, and I just stared at them trying to figure out how Amanda could do this, how she could look sick children in the face and then use money that was supposed to help them to buy herself a designer handbag, how she could give speeches about saving lives while secretly funding her own lifestyle, how she could accept our parents' $5,000 donation knowing it was going to pay for her boob job. I was furious and heartbroken, and I felt betrayed, not just as her sister, but as someone who'd believed in what she was doing. I knew I had to report this, but I struggled with it. Reporting her would destroy her life. She'd face criminal charges, probably federal charges since this was nonprofit fraud and mail fraud and potentially wire fraud. She could go to prison. Our parents would be devastated. Our family would be torn apart. But if I didn't report it, she'd keep doing it. She'd keep stealing from people who were trying to help sick children. And more importantly, those families who really needed help weren't getting it. Children with cancer weren't getting the support that donors thought they were funding. I couldn't let that continue no matter how much I loved my sister. I made copies of everything I'd found. I organized it all into a detailed report showing the flow of money from donations to Amanda's personal expenses. I documented every fraudulent transaction, every fake consulting payment, every designer purchase made with charitable funds. And then I called the FBI. I spoke to an agent in the white-collar crime division, and I said I have evidence of charity fraud and I need to report it. The agent asked who I was reporting, and I took a deep breath and said my sister. There was a pause, and then the agent said, "Okay, walk me through what you have." I spent 3 hours on the phone with the FBI agent going through everything. I sent over all my documentation. The agent said this was clearly a case they needed to investigate, and they'd be opening a formal investigation. They asked if I'd be willing to testify if it went to trial, and I said yes. They asked if Amanda knew I was investigating, and I said no. They told me not to confront her or warn her because they needed to secure evidence, and they didn't want her destroying records. I agreed and hung up feeling like I'd just done the worst and most necessary thing of my life. The FBI investigation took about 3 months. During that time, I had to act normal around Amanda and our family. I had to go to family dinners and smile and pretend everything was fine, while knowing I'd set in motion the destruction of my sister's life. It was torture. Amanda was planning another big gala and talking about expanding the charity nationally. She was more confident and successful seeming than I'd ever seen her, and I knew it was all about to come crashing down. There were moments I wanted to warn her, to give her a chance to come clean or make things right. But I knew she wouldn't. She'd lie and manipulate and try to cover it up, and the fraud would continue. The FBI executed search warrants on Amanda's apartment and the charity office on a Tuesday morning. They seized computers and financial records and boxes of documents. Amanda called me hysterical, saying the FBI had raided her office, and she didn't understand what was happening. I played dumb and said, "Oh my God, that's crazy. What did they say it was about?" And she said something about financial irregularities, but it had to be a mistake. She hadn't done anything wrong. I told her to get a lawyer and hung up. An hour later, the FBI called me to say they'd found everything I'd documented and more. Apparently, Amanda had been running this scam since day one. Even the early charitable donations had been inflated. She'd been taking money from the start. The arrest happened at Amanda's next fundraising event. She'd planned a big gala for that Saturday, and the FBI let it proceed so they could arrest her publicly. I think they wanted to send a message about charity fraud, and they wanted to do it in front of all the donors and community members who'd been deceived. I didn't attend because I couldn't watch, but I heard about it from people who were there. Amanda was on stage giving her usual inspiring speech about helping children when federal agents walked in. They waited for her to finish speaking, and then they walked up on stage and arrested her, told her she was being charged with wire fraud, mail fraud, and theft from a charitable organization. They handcuffed her in front of 300 people and let her out. The news coverage was immediate and extensive. Local philanthropist arrested for charity fraud, woman of year accused of stealing from cancer kids. The media had a field day. Amanda's mugshot was everywhere. The details of the fraud came out. $400,000 raised. Only $3,000 actually went to families. The rest went to Amanda's lifestyle: plastic surgery, Vegas trips, designer clothes. People were outraged. Donors felt betrayed. The families who'd appeared in promotional materials felt exploited. Our parents were destroyed. My parents called me the day after Amanda's arrest. They were crying and asking if I knew anything about what was happening. I told them the truth. I said I discovered the fraud and I reported it to the FBI. There was silence, and then my mother said, "You reported your own sister." And I said yes. I had to. What she was doing was wrong. My father said, "How could you do that to family?" And I said, "How could she steal from sick children?" We didn't speak for weeks after that. They were so angry at me for not warning them, for not giving Amanda a chance to fix it, for choosing to destroy their daughter's life. Amanda's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution wasn't interested. The fraud was too egregious, too public. They wanted to make an example. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and I testified. I walked into that courtroom, and I sat on the witness stand, and I explained how I discovered the fraud. I walked the jury through the financial records. I showed them the designer purchases and the Vegas hotels and the plastic surgery payments. I looked at Amanda while I testified, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. She sat there in a conservative suit, looking small and defeated. Nothing like the confident woman in designer gowns giving speeches about saving children. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Amanda to 8 years in federal prison. She also has to pay restitution to the donors, though she'll never be able to pay back $400,000. The Hope for Kids Cancer Foundation was dissolved. The remaining funds, about $12,000, were distributed to legitimate children's cancer charities. Amanda went to prison last month, and I haven't spoken to her since the trial. She sent me a letter saying she hoped I was happy that I'd destroyed her life, saying I was a terrible sister for choosing strangers over family. I didn't respond. My relationship with my parents is still strained. They're slowly coming to terms with what Amanda did, but they still resent me for being the one to report it. They think I should have confronted her privately first, given her a chance to stop. But I know Amanda, she wouldn't have stopped. She would have gotten better at hiding it. My mother said to me at one point, "Do you feel good about yourself? Your sister is in prison because of you." And I said, "No, I don't feel good. I feel terrible." But I'd do it again, because what she did was wrong and someone had to stop her. Children with cancer deserved better than to be exploited for my sister's plastic surgery. I've had to do a lot of therapy to process this whole experience. The guilt of turning in my own sister, the anger at her for putting me in that position, the grief over the loss of the relationship we had, the strain with my parents. It's been incredibly difficult. But I also know I did the right thing. I work in fraud investigation, and I see the damage that financial crimes cause. I see how they hurt innocent people. And I couldn't let Amanda continue to hurt people just because she's my sister. My loyalty to what's right had to be stronger than my loyalty to family. And I'm okay with that choice, even though it cost me. The local community has been supportive. People who donated to Hope for Kids have reached out to thank me for exposing the fraud. Some of them said they felt stupid for being fooled. But I told them Amanda was a skilled manipulator, and there was no way they could have known. Several legitimate children's cancer charities have seen an increase in donations because people still want to help, but now they're being more careful about vetting organizations. So some good has come from this disaster. Awareness about charity fraud has increased. People are asking better questions about where their donations go. Nonprofits are being held to higher standards. I've also been working with the FBI on other charity fraud cases. My testimony in Amanda's trial apparently impressed them, and they've asked me to consult on similar investigations. I've helped uncover 2 other fraudulent charities in the past 6 months. It's become a bit of a specialty for me. And while it's painful work because I see the worst of human greed, it's also meaningful because I'm protecting donors and making sure charitable funds actually go to the people who need them. I think about those families with children fighting cancer who should have received help from Hope for Kids but didn't, and that motivates me to keep doing this work. Amanda will be in prison for at least 6 years before she's eligible for parole. I don't know if she's reflected on what she did, or if she still sees herself as the victim. I don't know if she feels remorse for stealing from sick children, or if she's just angry she got caught. I hope she's getting therapy and working on herself, but I honestly don't know if she's capable of real change. The Amanda I thought I knew would never have done what she did. But maybe I never really knew her at all. Maybe she's always been capable of this level of selfishness and manipulation, and I just didn't want to see it. My parents are slowly starting to talk to me again. We had dinner last week, and my father apologized for the things he said right after Amanda's arrest. He said he understands now that I was in an impossible position, and I did what I thought was right. My mother is still struggling, but she acknowledged that what Amanda did was terrible, and that someone had to stop her. They're visiting Amanda in prison regularly, and they've asked me to come with them, but I'm not ready for that. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to see her again. The betrayal goes too deep. What I've learned from all of this is that doing the right thing isn't always easy or comfortable. Sometimes it means making choices that hurt the people you love. Sometimes it means being hated by your own family. But integrity isn't about doing what's easy. It's about doing what's right even when it costs you everything. My sister started a charity for sick kids and raised $400,000. I followed the money and found plastic surgery and Vegas trips. I called the FBI and testified at her trial, and she's now in prison. My family may never forgive me, but those children with cancer deserved better, and I'd make the same choice again. That's my story, and I'm sharing it because I want people to know that charity fraud is real and devastating. And if you see something wrong, you have an obligation to report it, even if it's your own sister, even if it destroys your family, because some things are more important than keeping the peace. Things like justice and protecting vulnerable people and making sure that money meant to save lives actually does save lives. Amanda chose to commit fraud, and I chose to expose it. We both have to live with those choices, and I'm at peace with mine.